Well, hello, everybody. My name is Stephanie Hoff. I'm the WISPbusiness.com editor. I see people are trickling in, so we'll go ahead and get going. But today I'm here with the WISPbusiness.com's first virtual luncheon event of the year. This one is titled Hospitality Industry Stirs After a Year of COVID. And we'll be with our state's hospitality industry leaders today, specifically in the food and drink sector, an industry that's been, hit pretty hard by this pandemic. And this is something new we're trying this year. So if you have ideas for more topics, you can visit wispbusiness.com, find our email listed under the contact info, and send a message our way. But before we chat with our stars of today's show, I'd like to give a big thanks to our sponsors, Madison Gas and Electric Company, University Research Park, Wisconsin Technology Council, and the Phelps Hamas Group. And now I'd like to welcome our panel. We've got Wisconsin Restaurant Association President and CEO, Christine Hilmer, Wisconsin Brewers Guild Executive Director, Mark Garthwaite, and Tavern League of Wisconsin President, Chris Marsicano. It's great to have the three of you on today to not only answer my questions, but questions we've got from the audience. And we'll get to those toward the end of the program. But as the title of our event says, we are just over a year into this pandemic, and it's totally changed the way we live and work and spend our money. And it's also impacted some industries in Wisconsin way more than others. And we know that COVID-19 hit hospitality especially hard. So to start out this program, I'd like for all of you to give me a status report on how things are going for the businesses you represent. And Christine, can we start with you?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today. We're just starting to see glimmers of hope as far as recovery is concerned, but it's still very early in the game. There's still parts of our state that have mandates and restrictions on restaurants and bars, so it's going to take a long time for recovery. Let's go pre-COVID for a second. We know that the hospitality industry represented a 9% of the employment in the state of Wisconsin. And when we know that fast forward to now, 10 to 15% of restaurants have already gone out of business, with an additional 20 to 30% on the brink, and we don't know when these federal dollars are going to be coming in, and compare that to that amount of employees that we have in our state, it's 9%. It's a huge impact. We were the first industry to be shut down. We're still not fully open. So although with our glimmers of hopes, it's still pretty difficult right now in the bar and industry, our restaurant industry.
And Chris, you're a member of the Wisconsin Restaurant Association with your supper club in Delavan. I mean, what does that look like for you? And then also, what's the status report on our taverns in Wisconsin?
Well, as Christine said, it's thank you for having me on the panel today. As Christine said, it's been devastating for our industry. We were shut down for almost 2.5 months with no money coming in at all. Our taverns and small independent restaurants and bars are desperately hurting. You know, through this whole thing, I think our industry has been unfairly scapegoated as, you know, as a cause of this, and we did nothing wrong. These are, you know, it's not our fault, and we've just tried to maintain, you know, stay in business. And so, like she said, you know, we are down about 40% in our industry. Sales, if some of them are not more, we have in the tavern industry, we have about 30% out of business that may never open again. So it's been a devastating year, and especially for our taverns in Madison-Dane and Milwaukee, who are still under severe lockdowns, just starting to get a little better now, 1 year later. So we're hoping, like she said, there's a light at the end of the tunnel, but it's going to take a long way to go. We're not out of the woods yet, and it's going to take some work, much needed work to work with the governor and the legislature to help our industry through this.
And Mark, you represent breweries, and that's kind of unique in that some are bars, some are restaurants, and then a lot supply to Christine and Chris's members. So
yeah,
you know, what does this look like for breweries?
It's yep, and thanks for having me here. It's good to join Christine and Chris as well. Yeah, the small and independent breweries are kind of hybrids in that they're producers, they're retailers as well, and many of them operate restaurants. So the shared pain that Christine and Chris mentioned was out there. The interesting thing, I think, if you look back 1 year ago, was when COVID first hit, and we had bars and restaurants with kegs of beer that were on tap that had no place to go. And what we learned very quickly is that the supply chain moving backwards is a lot different than moving supply toward our retail partners. So, you know, to think back a year ago where we were taking kegs of beer, moving it backwards and sending them off to distilleries to be turned into hand sanitizer, and suddenly with no retail accounts to really sell for on-premise sales, that massive shift from trying to go into keg beers to suddenly having to put all your beer into bottles and cans, there were a lot of small breweries that really weren't equipped to do that. So at the beginning of the pandemic, you know, to-go sales out the door were extremely important. But what we quickly ran into is what we jokingly refer to as the candemic, because the supply of cans suddenly became a limited resource. So, you know, combined with tariffs on aluminum, a massive shift toward packaging all beverages, not just beer, but all beverages in cans, created a lot of headaches, and a learning curve in how supply chains actually work. So I'll echo what they've said. There's glimmers of hope. We're gratified to see that a vaccine has been so rapidly deployed, and that's going to be very critical to the entire hospitality industry, is to get shots in arms as quickly as possible.
Mark, was retail for some breweries not enough to make up for bars and restaurants having to close down? Did we lose brewers in Wisconsin?
It's a little bit of a mixed bag. We did lose a few breweries. Most of them were able to hang on by trying to move as much as they could out the door, just like restaurants and taverns. You know, taverns in particular were much more severely affected if they were not operating restaurants. That's where I think the biggest failure, at least from a federal standpoint was that there was a slow response to recognize that, they didn't have any alternatives. At least in our case, we still had the capability of push beer out the front door, but it was significantly reduced. There was a lot of the shift toward larger producers and volume, whereas small breweries, some of them operating restaurants, were under the same constraints as any other restaurant would be.
And Chris, you said about 30% of bars in Wisconsin are closed and may close permanently. So what is the casualty rate for taverns in Wisconsin?
Well, taverns and in restaurants are not a high margin, especially on the food end, business to begin with. And then, as Mark said, our taverns that if you didn't sell food at all, were just absolutely devastated by the closure. I mean, the hospitality industry in general got the short end of the stick. I truly believe in this whole pandemic. The airlines got their bailout. This one got their bailout. They got their bailout. And there was nothing really now with this new act that was just passed by the federal government. There's something hopefully coming down the road for us. But this is a year later. And for 2.5 months, my members had no paychecks. They had no income. They were severely wondering, how am I going to feed my family? How am I going to hang on to this business that I've had all my life and worked all my life? And as a supper club owner, I'm in the same boat as my members. And there's many nights I went to bed and didn't sleep for fact of how am I going to survive after I've been here 56 years. And the people that could sell food and to-goes, that was great. It was something, but it was barely enough to keep up with the bills. And so it was just devastating for our people. Both taverns got the short end of the stick, definitely, but it's devastating for both segments of our membership.
Stephanie, if I can jump in here real quick, I just want to piggyback off of something that Chris said, that restaurants definitely were able to pivot to curbside and delivery as an option. However, please understand that even though that was an option, it only filled about 30% of the lost sales. So it does not come close to covering that lost revenue when you have either limitations or you've got a closed dining room. So it was a help, but it doesn't by any means come close to filling that gap.
And I would just add Christine just said just real quickly that we lost during that time we were closed. We lost a lot of our big holidays. We lost St. Patty's Day. We lost Easter. We lost Mother's Day, which is a huge day for our industry. So, and we barely made Memorial Day, and that's not what it should have been.
Yeah, and so that's why I wanted to make sure that folks understood that 30% coverage of that loss, yes, it's helpful, but it's still a really big hole that restaurants and bars have been facing.
That's an important point. It appeared in many ways, I think, if you saw restaurants that they were still hanging in there, it probably gave a false impression that they were able to work through this by doing solely takeout sales. What it doesn't account for is that added expense of just the cups and all the materials that you need in order to send food out the door or beverages out the door. Actually, beverages was a different story. We'll probably talk about that a little bit later. The margins still were probably worse, frankly. And in order to keep people on, your employees working, it was kind of a losing proposition. But it was just that you felt like you were treading water with the hopes that someday we would get past this, and we just didn't really realize how long this would actually take.
And a lot of our members stayed open, and they used up their savings doing it. Just to stay open and do what they could to goes, and used up a lot of their savings. They weren't making money, that's for sure.
Christine, would you be able to paint a picture for us? How many restaurants has Wisconsin lost, and how many won't come back even post-pandemic?
It's really a difficult picture to paint, because there's a lot of restaurants and bars who silently closed their doors. And we're not really going to get a true picture until the business license renewals come up in June. Our best guess at this point, and this is actually a national problem, people trying to put numbers on it, the best guess is 10 to 15% have already closed their doors. with an additional 20 to 30% really on that bubble, not knowing if they're going to make it. And we do know that the federal government just passed $28.6 billion for the restaurant industry to be able to help fill some of that gap. However, when you consider the lost sales are estimated at $250 billion, it's a drop in the bucket. And we also don't know when those funds are going to be available. In fact, I just saw today, there was a bucket of funds for stages that was approved in December. They just started opening up and possibly having that be available now. So it could be 2 months before we are able to access those dollars. And in that time, restaurants who have been just trying to survive by the skin of their teeth may not be able to make it. So again, we've got glimmers of hope, but there's still a lot of distance between now and really saying that we're going to be able to survive.
Yeah, and Christine, well, we're going to stay with you. What did aid look like from state and federal governments? And, you mentioned there's some delay in it being received, but what has been received, what has helped, and, was it a good thing, or do you need more?
Absolutely need more, without a doubt. So every business who was impacted did have access to the PPP funds. For the most part. I mean, we know that there's some that didn't qualify for lots of different reasons, but the PPP as well as the second draw was very, very helpful. In fact, without that, I really dare to say that we would not be even in a position where we're talking that restaurants are going to be able to survive. There's a lot that just would have closed their doors. They couldn't have been able to do it. The difficulty with PPP, of course, is it was very prescriptive on how you could use those dollars, meaning you had to pay your employees, or you had to have your overhead and so on. It was very prescriptive. The state of Wisconsin did have the We're All In grants. Phase 1 and 2 were for the very small ones with revenue, gross revenues under $1 million. And then the third at the end of last year, we had $20,000 grants, and you automatically qualified based on criteria the state set up. So those were all very helpful. They don't come close to filling the lost revenue and the lost sales, but all were really helpful along the way. The $28.6 billion Restaurant Revitalization Act that I mentioned before, that's probably the one saving grace that we have coming down the pike. It doesn't sound like they're going to have as many restrictions as they did on the PPP. However, we just don't know when that is going to be opening up and what restrictions we don't know about it. That's the one thing that we found out with the PPP, even though the legislative intent that this is tax-free, we legislatively had to go through getting the federal business deductions taken care of at the state level, which we did, which we're thankful for, but we don't know what kind of monkey wrenches and restrictions the federal government and the Small Business Administration is going to throw at us with this fund, because now that they have their hands on it, things could change a little bit. So there's a lot unknown right now.
And Chris, you've said repeatedly, taverns have gotten the short end of the stick during this. And if I recall, that those state grants were for restaurants. It wasn't, We're All In for bars. But what were you able to take advantage of?
Well, some of our people, the PPP was not really designed for our small mom and pop bars and taverns out there, because a lot of our people, it might be a husband and wife, or partners at the bar, and they might run it themselves, and they don't have a lot of employees, so the PPP just was not there for them. It just didn't work for them. Thankfully, some of our people were able to take advantage of it, and like Christine said, I agree with her 100%. It helped. I think we would be looking at an industry that is just absolutely flattened like an atom bomb without it. But for our people, it was difficult because some of them qualified for the All In grant from the state, but the PPP was not something that they qualified for. So these are my members that used their life savings that were, to try just to keep their doors open. And so it was, like I said, I think that segment of the industry was hit more heavily because they had nothing to fall back on. If bars were closed, you couldn't sell alcohol, you were just closed, and that was it.
And Mark, what did this look like for breweries? Did breweries take advantage of any aid? Was anything coming their way?
It's similar to what Christine and Chris have just discussed. In some cases, for the very smallest of the small breweries, it was a similar situation to what Chris just described, that PPP just wasn't adequate or wasn't really available to some of the other breweries. Like, and here's, you know, the breweries that we have are a variety of different types of business models. So for the ones that were more focused on production and we're already on the path of focusing more on distribution to retail, they were in a better position to take advantage of some of that because they'd already made that shift toward packaging in bottles or cans. But again, for a vast majority of our smallest breweries, it was a similar situation as, you know, if they're also restaurant operators or heavily focused on tap room sales because they don't engage in a lot of distribution. It was a similar situation. I know the restaurant at the federal level, the original push for the Restaurants Act was for, you know, $120 billion. We did get, you know, for restaurants, you know, as Christine mentioned, it was $28.6 billion. Hopefully the remaining that is necessary will continue to be on the legislative agenda going forward. I know at least at a national level, the National Restaurants Association, the Brewers Association are pushing for that. But again, you know, and the We're All In grants were helpful for some of our breweries that operated restaurants as well. Others couldn't take advantage of it. You know, so it was a mixed bag, really.
Christine, I want to jump to you now. You know, we know restaurant workers, tavern workers, they were laid off. They were put out of a job during the economic shutdown. So were stimulus payments and unemployment expansion, was that beneficial for hospitality workers?
So this is a complicated issue. It may not seem so on the surface, but it's really, really complicated. Certainly the federal stimulus dollars were really helpful for those individuals who are laid off and without any other means of income. However, we saw pre-COVID, and we are really starting to see now a real difficulty in finding employees at all levels of the industry, and that's going to accelerate. There's a lot of employees in the hospitality who went to other industries who are no longer available. And now with the $300, there are some still sitting on the sidelines. And I see every single day, and I have conversations with our members all the time, they say, we can ramp up, we have openings, we can hire people, but we just cannot find them. I know there is a high-end resort in the middle part of the state. They've had 5 executive chef openings for the past 3 months, and they cannot fill it. And I see this as probably one of the biggest struggles the industry is going to have moving forward, because we're at a limited capacity now. We're going to add folks in. It's getting warmer. We're going to add outside dining. The tourism is going to start coming up. People are going to be having family vacations. So finding employees is going to be the biggest challenge. And I do know that the federal government just extended the $300 well past the summer. So it's going to be problematic. And then people are going to feel that urge. And I feel the urge all the time. I want to be able to get out and go to a great restaurant and go to a great bar and have those social interactions. And people are going to be disappointed, I hope not, with the level of service, because people just aren't willing to work right now.
Christy, I mean, is that something that you see as well?
Absolutely, I couldn't agree with Christine more. In the Tavern League of Wisconsin, we have a huge mix of our members, from anywhere from the 10-stool mom and pop bar to the supper club to the huge resorts. And I'm hearing that from all of my members, whether it's the small bar, corner bar, or the supper club or the resort. They just cannot get anybody to work. My members are, shutting down 2-3 days during the week, on the slower days, just opening on the weekends because they can't field enough people to work. As the chefs, wait staff, and bartenders is a huge problem to fill. Christine says, my supper club is in a resort area, and I'm just having a heck of a time trying to staff for the summer to gear up. And from what I'm hearing from my customers is that people cannot wait to get vaccinated and to get out. They're tired of being in the house. Everybody's got cabin fever, and they want to come out. And my restaurant's on the lake, like she said. You're going to have people outside want to dine outside. That's going to be a new thing that last year it just took off like wildfire, and people are going to expect it more this year because they're still a little afraid of the inside and the closeness of dining together, and a little wary of it. And so it's going to be a huge problem. And, in the hospitality industry, whatever segment you're in, we don't like to disappoint our customers. We want our customers to come out, be happy, and have a good time, and feel like they're getting the value for their money. So we don't want our customers to be happy. And so we're desperately trying to field enough workers, but it's going to be difficult. That is going to be the biggest problem, I think, going forward in the next few months that our members face.
Mark, did our beer makers experience, did they have to lay off a lot of people? And then are you also trying to recruit employees now that maybe things are picking back up?
It's a similar story, yeah. I mean, PPP for again, it depends on the size of the brewery. PPP was very helpful for some of the breweries that were more production focused, but brew pubs and smaller breweries are the same as just Christine and Chris has just described. The hard part was when you lose good employees and you can't get them back. I think that's the most frustrating part about all of this, is that you are in this situation where you really wanted to keep the people that had been with you, and you couldn't, and you're not going to get them back. So it's hard to combine that with the difficulties of forecasting what this summer actually is going to look like. Chris is mentioning the hesitancy that some people will have going out. That's perfectly understandable. It makes your forecasting for how much staffing you're actually going to need going forward, and to be able to time that with the available workforce that's there for you is going to be very difficult.
And as we're approaching the halfway mark for our discussion, I do want to thank our listeners again for tuning in to our discussion about the hospitality sector, which has been hit especially hard by the pandemic. And we're very happy to be able to talk with our three panelists today. I also want to give another shout out to our sponsors for making this event possible. So thank you, Madison Gas and Electric Company, University Research Park, the Wisconsin Technology Council, and the Phelps Hamas Group. I want to stay on this workforce discussion for just a bit. We've been hearing from industries from manufacturing to healthcare that there is a workforce crisis right now. Wisconsin has a labor shortage, is just the name of the game right now. But you've mentioned you guys are struggling to find workers for various reasons. But I feel like the hospitality industry is a bit different because you guys can take on seasonal, part-time workers from different age groups or education levels. So do you have a larger pool of labor, and is maybe the unemployment benefit expansion the only thing that's preventing you from hiring people? And Christine, would you like to go first?
Sure. I think there's a lot of additional complicating factors when you talk about workforce development. You've got a lot of teenagers that I remember when I grew up, I, as a teenager, had a job. There's a lot of teenagers that don't. They have a lot of other extracurricular activities, or they have sports, or parents don't want them to work for whatever reason. But really, as a teenager, the restaurant industry is one of the perfect places to have a job. 1 in 3 working adults right now started in the hospitality industry. And it's a really great way to learn those soft skills, showing up on time, eye-to-eye contact, that customer service, and all those things that all other employers need down the road, they learn in hospitality. And when those teenagers don't get jobs or aren't willing to work, I think that has a ripple effect within the entire economy. The other complicating factor is J-1 visas. So right now they're not coming in. And I know especially the tourism areas of the state are really hard hit. One of our members who's a resort in the Wisconsin Dells area, by now, March 25th, they should have 50 J-1 visas on their property starting to work. They have 2. And they don't see that ban stopping anytime soon. So getting them in the summer in that critical 3-month time frame that they need for when families go on vacation, it's going to be really difficult. So it's not just unemployment. It's the teenagers not wanting to work, it's the J-1 visas and so on. And so those are complicating factors on top of unemployment, really having some people sitting on the sideline as a result.
Chris, do you have anything to add to that too?
No, I don't have anything. I think Christine put it very well. I think that's exactly what's going on, and I think she hit it right on the head.
And Mark, what's the workforce situation for breweries, which are, manufacturers too?
Combinations, yeah, we're combinations. The complicating factor here is that we are talking about alcohol beverages as well. So you've sort of limited your employment or employee pool as well. Obviously, we're not going to have teenagers producing beer, so we're at a little bit of a disadvantage in that regard as well. So and the other part of just hospitality in general, there's just generally more churn. And that's always a difficulty to work with. But when we're in a world now with a little bit more of a gig economy, there are gig opportunities that young people gravitate toward that also kind of works to our disadvantage in hospitality.
And now I want to talk about another item that would impact, your businesses and their employees. And this is what's been going around the federal and state level, the minimum wage. And so right now it's $7.25 in Wisconsin. Governor Evers is asking for a phased increase to $10.15 by 2024. Legislative Dems wanted to go up further. And congressional Dems wanted a $15 minimum wage, and that it almost wound up in the stimulus bill, but it didn't go through at the end there. So, Mark, we'll stick with you. What are your thoughts on the current wage in Wisconsin and all these proposals to boost it up?
I think it's pretty clear that we can't subsist on low wages in general. The challenge, of course, is that if we aren't able to keep restaurants and taverns and brewery tap rooms full of people, it makes it difficult to operate on slim margins and to be able to pay the wages that we want to pay. I think we are preparing. We have to prepare that eventually we do have to incrementally get to a point where those are more attractive wage jobs for attracting more employees. It's as simple as that.
Chris, why don't you tell us your thoughts on the current minimum wage and the efforts to boost it up?
Well, I think, I agree. We subsist on very small margins, and, it's very hard. I don't know of any one of my members right now that is paying minimum wage to people coming in. I mean, they're paying good because the labor shortage is there. They're paying more than minimum wage to get people and good workers. And when you have a good worker, you pay them to keep them because you want them to stay with you. But I don't think it's quite fair to say that we have to pay an entry-level worker at 16 or 17 years old the same as we would pay a 35 or 40-year-old worker that has been with me for 15 or 20 years. I have employees that have been with me for almost 40 years. And then if the minimum wage goes up to a certain amount, then that means I have to boost that other worker up, and it goes in a chain. So I mean, you have to say, well, if you look around a restaurant and you have all these people working and you're paying everybody a $15 minimum wage, for example, I mean, you have $300-400 an hour tied up in just labor, and there's not many restaurants that are going to survive. And I think if you look at what's happened in some major cities that have gone to local minimum wage mandates, you'll see that the hospitality industry has been hit very hard by that. So I think it definitely, we need to pay quality wages, but it has to be something in line that will be sustainable for our business and industry.
Christine, is that the same sentiment that you're hearing from the rest of your members?
It's very, very similar. And I will echo what Chris just mentioned. The restaurant and bar industry has such a tight profit margin. On average, it's a 3 to 5% profit margin, meaning every dollar that comes into a restaurant, 95 to 97 cents on that dollar are already spoken for in terms of your food costs, your overhead costs, your labor costs, and so on. So that profit margin is very, very slim. add the restrictions or the capacity limits and so on, and you're in the red. And we welcome a conversation on changing of the minimum wage. We do not feel that now is the best time, at least for our industry, because we are so hard hit. The other thing that we also know that if the wages go up, restaurants and bars are going to have to charge more. And I am a born and raised Wisconsinite, very proud of my heritage here in the state. But Wisconsinites are frugal. And if you add $1 to your hamburger or fish fry or prime rib or whatever it is, customers have to understand that's because the labor rates are going up, plus supply prices are going up, and it's continuing to compress that profit margin. And then Chris is absolutely right. You've got wage compression that's going to happen. So you have a starter, somebody who's 16 or 17 years old, you're now going to have a raised minimum wage. Well, you've got other staff that's at a higher wage, but they're going to like, wait a second, they're getting more money. So where's my money? Where's back at the house and so on? So everybody's going to be skewed higher. And what's going to likely happen is those entry-level jobs may no longer be available. Though that the flexibility that hospitality workers love, that's one of the things they love about our industry, that's no longer going to be available, or their hours are going to be cut in order to help make up some of that profit difference and so on. The other thing that is a unique aspect when you talk about wages in the restaurant industry is having the tip credit. And that is such an important thing for our industry. And we hear a lot of folks say, oh, it's sub minimum wage, it's only $2.33 an hour and so on. Well, there's a couple of myths that I need to dispel when we talk about the tip credit. First of all, everybody in this country has to be making minimum wage. Now, yes, the tip credit is a lower wage, but then they get up to that minimum wage by tips. But the beauty of tips is there's no ceiling. They can go well above that. In fact, right now in the United States, tipped workers make on average between $19 and $24 an hour. So when you hear sub minimum wage, that's really not telling the full story. Tips are wages, and that's part of that compensation package. And what that allows somebody like Chris or other restaurateurs to do is you can utilize the tip credit for your servers. And then you can have higher wages in the back of your house, your chefs, your sous chefs, and so on. Without that tip credit, you are not going to have that flexibility. You're going to have all sorts of disparity. And servers, we know that what's likely going to happen, you eliminate the tip credit, those tips are going to be pooled with everybody at the restaurant, including the back of the house. So we know that every single effort in this country in the past couple of years to eliminate the tip credit has failed. Because once we tell the story of what it truly means to those workers who really rely on those tips as part of their compensation, they're like, wait a second, that means I'm likely to get paid less because now my tips go to all sorts of other people. So it's very complicated. But I'm really worried about that effort. It's not a sub minimum wage. Everybody has to make the federal minimum wage. But with tips, many times you exceed what a stated hourly wage would be.
Well, I'll tell you what, Christine, when you were talking about, teenagers working in restaurant jobs, I was one of those teenagers. I started out in the service sector for about 4 years, and I made a heck of a lot more in tips than I would have otherwise, and that's how I got through school, actually. So anyway, I'm not advocating for or against anything. I just wanted to. But
that's exactly right, and it's a great job for a lot of people who need flexibility, who really have that hospitality heart and really want to hustle and so on. That's an incentive to do that, and to eliminate the tip credit, I think, is just short-sighted. Do we need to have a discussion on what that starting that tip minimum wage is? Absolutely. We are more than welcome to have that conversation, but to eliminate the tip credit eliminates a very powerful tool for restaurants and bars to manage their staff, really give some great wages. And you're right. Think about, Stephanie, when you were doing that, If you weren't able to take your tips home, your wages would have been substantially lower.
Now, Mark, you answered this question first. So after hearing Christine and Chris's comments, do you have anything else you want to add before we jump to a new topic?
I can't embellish on anything at all. Christine said it very well. It's complicated. It really is. I mean, if from a brewery perspective, if you're looking at your production staff, no question, you have to pay good wages, no question about it. At the front of the house, it's a lot more complicated. You know, we want everyone to have a good paying job, but again, the nature of the industry makes it not so straightforward. And I think Christine hit on those points very eloquently.
All right, so now I want to jump to the cocktail to go bill, which has been a very exciting bill going through the legislature. And Christine, we'll start with you on this. This is something both you and Chris, both of your organizations have supported, and even showed your support before we started this discussion. But why is this important for restaurants?
So let's go back to a couple of things that I mentioned earlier in the call. So we know that with restrictions and closed dinings and capacity limits and so on, that a lot of restaurants were able to pivot to curbside pickup of their food. So you can call the restaurant, you can order your favorite as fish fry, pizza, Italian dinner, whatever it is, and you can go to the restaurant and pick it up. But when you take that home, one of the things that what you don't have is that famous craft cocktail, margarita, Bloody Mary, old fashioned, you know, to the proper proportions that make it such a delicious addition to your restaurant experience. You actually currently cannot take that home with you. And we also know in the business that bar sales are where the profit margins are for restaurants. The food side is very, very slim. In fact, there's some dishes that are made that it's actually in the red. But you make up for that when you have bar sales and people enjoying that pre-dinner cocktail and having that glass of wine with dinner and maybe having that after dinner drink. What the cocktail to go allows restaurants to do is to be able to prepare those drinks, put it in a container that's then sealed. And there's lots of different ways to seal it. And then it can go out the door with that to-go order. Or you want that last minute drink after you're done eating, but you know, maybe I shouldn't have that last cocktail before I drive home. Well, you know what? Now you have a solution. You can have that cocktail made, put in a container, off you go, and you can enjoy it at home. So it adds to the tickets and adds to the ticket amounts for the restaurant. That's why it's so important. And again, there's lots of different solutions. You know, there's mason jars that you can put a plastic seal around, heat seal it, and then it's tamper evident. Or in Washington, D.C., if you think of when you had kids, the Capri Sun pouches, well, they've got these pouches, they're called Fauci pouches with Dr. Fauci's pictures on it, that they then can fill that with a cocktail, they can seal it up and off you go. The key is it's tamper evident. So if somebody were to illegally open that in their car, it's immediately known. And it really makes it no different than going to your local convenience store, picking up a can of beer and crack it in your car. It's illegal, should never be done. Well, those safeguards are in place, but once it leaves that restaurant or bar, you do lose control over it. And so it's evident when it's been opened by the consumer.
Chris, how would your restaurant use this if the governor signs it into law?
Well, we surely hope that the governor will sign it into law. It's been a long time coming. This should have happened a year ago when we were completely shut down. And we will use it we're still doing a lot of, especially fish fry in Wisconsin. I mean, that's a staple here, and the old fashioned. And so we found when we were closed that people were craving their fish fry and they came out to get it to go, but they were missing that old fashioned. They were missing the margaritas. I have a friend of mine who owns a Mexican restaurant here in Delavan, and he was missing his margarita sales. And you know, this is not going to be a cure-all for our industry. This is not going to cure all our ills, but it's something. It's another $400 or $600 that our members can maybe a month they can put in their bank. And you know, it might not seem like a lot of money, but for somebody that hasn't had a paycheck in a year, that's a lot of money, and it will help pay some bills. But you know, I think you know, like Christine said, our margins on food are very slim. that alcohol is where you always make it. So, I mean, when we were closed, you didn't have those people having an old fashioned at the bar, then going in and eat their fish fry and maybe having a grasshopper afterwards. So this way they can maybe take that grasshopper home if they want after their dinner, or they can get the 2 fish fry to go if they're still feeling wary about coming out in public. I mean, we still have people that haven't not been vaccinated or just don't feel comfortable coming out yet, but they still want to have that Wisconsin Friday night and have a fish fry, have an old fashioned. And some of our members got creative in the beginning when this was illegal, and when you couldn't do this, and they were selling the old fashioned mix, making it up in a glass and putting the mix separate, and then selling like the little airline bottles of whether it was brandy or that. But then again, there's an added cost to that. I mean, you don't have the margin on that when you're buying little bottles as to having the big bottle. So they weren't making as much money off of that either. In fact, it might have been even a money loser buying the separate little bottle, but it was something they could offer their customers, to give them that experience. So I think this is going to be great for us. I think it's a little late, but we'll take it.
And Mark, I don't know how much this would impact breweries if it does at all.
It does. Actually, there are a lot of brew pubs. So brew pubs operate under the same retail licenses that any other restaurant operates under. So for them, it's frustrating. You can send beer home with someone, but you couldn't send a cocktail home. This fixes that. The only disappointment is that there are a small number of breweries that were excluded from the bill, and that's basically due to a technicality that's been dogging us for 10 years that hopefully we can fix going forward. But when Chris mentioned grasshopper, it just made me realize that I hadn't had one of those in a long time. So I have to pop over for one.
I was caught up on that too. And I was like, stop thinking about the grasshopper and listen to Chris. But Chris, do you have pink squirrels at all too?
Yeah, absolutely. We got pink squirrels, golden Cadillacs, grasshoppers, whatever you want, we can make it.
I was gonna say, yeah, if you serve pink squirrels, I'm coming this weekend. But so I'm gonna jump to an audience question now, and this is actually for Chris and Mark. What our audience member asked us, would the Tavern League be willing to support changes in the state requirements that would allow breweries to serve wine? And I'm not familiar with that law at all. Mark, I don't know if you'd be able to explain that to us.
Yeah, so this is, and we're going to get into some really inside baseball kind of stuff here, but when Prohibition was repealed in 1933, everyone who sold any alcohol beverages at retail held the exact same licenses. Whether you were a brewery or a wholesaler or a retailer, a bowling alley, no matter what, you held the exact same license. That stayed in effect for 80 some years, and then certain laws were changed to fold some of the retail sales privileges for breweries into the state brewer permit. The complicating thing here is that we want to be able to accommodate all of our customers, no question about it. Certainly today, a lot of customers want gluten-free options, and that gets to be a little bit more difficult. We do have a fantastic gluten-free brewery in Madison that I highly recommend. If you're a celiac, Alt Brew, I'm going to put in a plug for them. But accommodating customers to give them what they want, particularly a glass of wine. We have a lot of tourists that come to visit breweries, and their companion isn't interested in beer, but they're interested in tagging along. They just want either a cider or a glass of wine. I don't think that's too much to ask. So for 80 some years, that was perfectly legal to do. That changed in 2011. We would love to be able to accommodate our customers and restore those retail privileges.
So Chris, why is our audience asking if the Tavern League is willing to support those changes? Is that something that you don't support?
Well, it's like Mark said, it's a kind of a complicated issue, but brewery license are brewery license. If you opened a brewery, then you're a brewery. If you opened a restaurant bar, you're a restaurant bar. And we feel that, when you manufacture the beer and you sell the beer, you can do it at a better cost than we can do it, because we have to go through a wholesaler with a 3-tier system. So right now we do not support letting the breweries sell wine and other products. So, but who's to say down the road that we can't have a talk and straighten something out? But at this point, we are not looking at that.
Yeah, and then so another audience question, they're asking, are they going to expect higher prices from restaurants and taverns because those establishments are trying to make up for COVID losses? And these higher prices could be either on the menu or they're going to be either in the tip, like an automatic gratuity. I mean, is that something diners are going to expect?
I think you're going to expect higher prices, but it's not because they're trying to necessarily make up lost wages. I think you're going to see, in order to attract more employees, you have to pay higher wages. The supply prices are hard. So, the cost to produce that fish fry or that prime rib dinner and so on, all those supply prices are going up. In addition to that, there is, of course, wanting to try to rebuild the business, but I think it's the other elements that are going to be raising the prices more so than that catch-up factor.
Yeah, I agree with Christine. I think at this point, our members are thankful to have our customers in there, and we are certainly, we know people have been out of jobs out there too, so we're certainly not looking to raise our prices to gouge anybody or make up for lost business, but our costs are going up continuously. I know during COVID, the beef prices went up, some of the seafood prices went up astronomically. Produce, depending on what weather event they talk about happens, that goes up. So of course with the to-goes, all the to-go boxes cost extra, and nobody ever raised their prices for all these to-go meals, and that added to our bottom line. I think if prices do go up, it's going to be because of the issues Christine raised. It's going to be our product, our wages, and our overhead, because everything else continues to go up. And the thing is, like I go back to what Christine said, I think is very apt that Wisconsinites are very frugal. They're not going to waste their money, and they want value for their money. So they're not going to stand for a $17 fish fry or an $18 fish fry. So we have to be competitive with each other, and we have to hold the line. And even with beer prices, the beer distributors, they might raise their beer a quarter a case and 50 cents a case, and you keep holding that line because you want to be competitive. But pretty soon, sooner or later, you get to a point where you say, I have to raise my prime rib a quarter. I have to raise my fish fry a quarter because I've held the line for 2 years and my cost might have gone up $1, but I've held the line and now I finally have to go up a quarter. So I think if it goes up, it's going to be because, we have to, in order to even keep that slim margin of 3%,
Yeah, I alluded to it earlier that we learned an awful lot about the supply chain. There were a lot of unusual disruptions, and I mentioned the aluminum issue earlier. Aluminum prices went up because of tariffs and also because of mass demand. I think it'll take a little while before things to normalize a little bit, but we'll all try to absorb as much as we can to make sure that the Wisconsinites are eager to come back. It's not our goal to just raise prices for the sake of raising prices. We understand, especially on the supply side, that has a trickle down effect or trickle up effect in terms of pricing. So it's very important for us to try to hold the line as best we can.
Well, that's great information because, for the consumer, I remember serving tables and we had to do price adjustments on our menus, and the regulars went ballistic when they're so used to the certain price, and as soon as it moves, they have a lot of questions and want to know why their bill's a little bit higher. But so that's great. Now another audience member, it sounds like maybe they're rooting for the hospitality, food service and drinks industry to push back against government overreach. So I'm curious, what you think of this pandemic climate, maybe the economy having to be forced to shut down, maybe some of these mandates. What are your thoughts? And Mark, we'll stick with you.
I guess I'm not clear on what the specific government overreach issues would be of concern here. I think, inevitably, I guess if we wanted to just talk about mask mandates, My background in a previous life was in my biomedical research. So I take matters of health and safety very seriously, and our brewers did too. So when the pandemic initially hit, and there was so much that we didn't really understand about it, and that a lot of really smart people really didn't understand the full implications of what this virus was really all about. It was easy for us to explain to brewers, or for brewers to understand, because they know how yeast propagates, right? And that same concept is how virus spreads. And knowing, and having some background in sanitation and microbiology, it was easy for a lot of brewers to understand the gravity of the situation. So in terms of the masking and things like that, we knew it was also important to make sure that the public would have faith in our ability to keep them safe, to make their visits when they even, early days, just coming to pick up something to go. We knew how important that was. And it's unfortunate that it became so highly politicized with respect to masking, because it's just a simple fact of science. It works, whether it's mandated or not. Maybe that's the genesis of the question. We will get back to normal at some point, but in the meantime, I ask on behalf of hospitality to continue to wear those masks, because that helps keep us open. Otherwise, we're just going to go right back into the same roller coaster ride of allowing variants to take traction and put us right back in a situation where we're limiting our ability to stay open.
Chris, do you, agree with the listener that there was government overreach? And if so, why and what was it?
Well, I believe in the beginning, as Mark would say, I would totally agree with him that in the beginning we didn't know what we were dealing with, and I think the government made the right decision in the beginning to shut us down and to see what was going to happen, because we were all kind of in the dark. Even the experts were in the dark of what was going on here. And so I think in the beginning it was the right decision, and we followed that decision and we went along with it. But as we've got into like almost 3 months here, especially, some of us could do to-goes, but the bars, our industry was completely shut down. And it got to be the point where other places were open, we were shut down. And, I had my members calling me and saying, I'm going out of business. I have a family to feed. I can't feed my family. I have employees that are relying on me to feed their family, to keep a roof over their head. What do I do? And, the hospitality industry by nature, we take care of people. We take care of our customers. We want our customers to be happy. We want our customers to be safe. And that is what we've always done before pandemic. We have our customers come in and eat safely and drink safely. And that is by nature what hospitality is. And so I think we in the hospitality industry had a better idea of how to keep our customers safe. Number one, we all go through sanitation courses. We are health inspected regularly. We have licenses, and I think we had a better idea of how to keep everybody safe. We followed the CDC guidelines. We masked up our people. We asked our customers to wear masks until they were seated. We pulled our tables apart, the distancing. We pulled apart our bar stools. We took every precaution we could, got rid of our salad bars. We did everything we possibly could. And I think, as we look at our friends in Madison-Dane and Milwaukee, they have just suffered under this continual crush of mandates. And when you look outside of the rest of Wisconsin per capita, there is practically no difference between the infection rates of Madison-Dane and surrounding counties. Or if you look at, Wisconsin is doing much better, and other than Madison-Dane and certain other cities has been pretty much wide open since Memorial Day. But following CDC guidelines and following all the precautions, then say the state of Michigan, which is still locked down, and they're in the top third, and we're in the bottom third of infection. So I think, hospitality people, restaurant bar owners, I think we're smart enough, brewers, I think we're all smart enough to know how to take care of our customers. I think, I think it's time to start letting us open up and do what we know how to do, and that is take care of our customers safely and do it and do it, to their benefit tonight, because we all have our customers' best interests at heart. Because we don't have customers, we don't have a business.
So Christine, we're approaching the very end. And so I wanted to wrap up on a happy note. If you could each give me one line, what you're looking forward to, either whether it's next month or post-pandemic or whatever. Christine, why don't you start us?
So my husband and I have continued to go out to eat since we have been able to. We make a habit of it every single week. What I'm really looking forward to is seeing packed bars, packed restaurants, and people having fun and having that social hour that they are so very well missing, especially those who have really quarantined and not felt comfortable going out. That's going to feel wonderful to me.
All right, Chris, one line. What are you looking forward to?
I couldn't agree more. I'm looking forward to seeing a full restaurant on Friday night, a full bar with people enjoying themselves, and seeing my regular customers. I miss my regular customers, and I know all of my members miss their regular customers desperately.
And Mark, wrap us up here. What are you looking forward to?
I'm looking forward to hanging out with people, having a beer with all of you, and most importantly, a tap beer. I miss tap beer, so I look forward to a nice tap Wisconsin beer in every bar, restaurant, brewery in this state.
Great. I'm looking forward to that as well. So, well, anyway, we're at the end, so I'll wrap us up here. Thank you so much, Christine, Chris, and Mark, for the conversation. You're welcome back anytime. And I want to thank our sponsors once again for making this happen: Madison Gas and Electric, University Research Park, Wisconsin Technology Council, and the Phelps Hamas Group. So thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.